How's it going, YouTube? Come much today with another video, and today, guys, what the brand new is going to be a meta breakdown of what we can expect to see at Indianapolis, all the different kind of tech options and whatnot. I'm just going to be breaking down a few of the different decks that we will see pretty prevalent at this event, so I do hope that you enjoy, as we're just going to be talking about some of the ins and outs and things to look out for. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on Gem, Grimoire, Imperium, Dragonshield, or my brand new sponsor, Cloud, definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description. Thank you so much for joining the team, Cloud. I really appreciate you and all my sponsors. It's so wonderful to have all of you here. Thanks for being a part of the team, and I appreciate each and every one of you for making all of this happen. So thank you so much, and let's hop right on into the video. So the first deck I want to talk about is going to be Fluandies. This is going to be a deck that you're going to see Featherstorms, D-Shifters, all of the most degenerate cards in the game or just slapped in this deck. Thrust, Talent, what you can name it, you know, Evenlies. This is something where you can consider siding cards like Lancia. I think Lancia is very good right now for this reason alone. It does very well into this deck because all the birds go to grave. They can't use pot, they can't use Advent, Map. Like, there's so many cards that Fluandies just can't use, which is really nice. I think that Droll also should just be like in the main deck or in the side. I don't think that Droll ends up being very good in this matchup most times, just because like if you get shifted, then it's just like dead. So you need like the bigger blowout. That's why a lot of people are playing like there can be only one, because if you play Droll and it goes off, then like you win. But if they shifter you, then you're just kind of staring at it. So it's unfortunate. Definitely an Imperm meta. I don't know about like a Veiler meta, but definitely an Imperm meta. So Imperm should definitely be in your list as well to go ahead and counter decks like this. There can be only one, though, is one of your best options. If you can side it, I would. Featherstorm is something that is just kind of is what it is, right? This is a card that you could just end up auto losing to. I do recommend at least playing Lancia, though, in your sideboard if you are going to be considering anything. The deck itself doesn't have like a ton of counters, except the fact that the deck can brick pretty bad. Droll, you can side Cosmics to try to hit the trap so that your opponent can't summon on your turn, unless you like normal summon. But overall, Fluandies hasn't really changed. I think this deck is going to be one of the highest represented decks at the event. Probably like 10% of the room, to be honest with you. So definitely consider this whenever you're going to be at that event, because this is going to be a very real matchup that you're going to have to think about. Sometimes you can just pick a deck for the event if you think that this is going to be the most popular that doesn't auto lose to shifter. So definitely consider that whenever you're looking for your deck option for this weekend. The next deck here is going to be Rescue Ace, talking more so about the Little Knight package and everything else that we're going to be seeing in the deck. This is actually really interesting because your opponent does have the option to now go ahead and banish their cards if you go to Imperm them. So you do have to like early Imperm on things like Turbulence just to make sure. But a lot of times they can still pump out another Turbulence. So even if they go ahead and banish their Turbulence early on, just to make sure that the Imperm doesn't go through, that is still something to consider. The deck has gotten considerably better with the Diabell Star cards, the extra draw of the Hunter's Fiend, and then you also just get the ability to slam a Hydrant on the board because, you know, Diabell Star cards. Those cards are very, very good. A lot of the negation that gets put up now is like Baron, Savage, etc. A lot of things that you'll see with a bunch of back row. So just kind of consider that as you're moving forward against this deck. I do think that Lightning Storm and Duster are going to be MVPs against this deck. I also think that things like Evenly are very good here. Just something to consider. There's a lot of cards that they can chain, which is also something that can be problematic whenever you want to use things like Evenly. But Lancia can also be very pseudo good here, just because of the fact that you can make sure your opponent cannot summon a Turbulence outside of an emergency. So if you do open up that Lancia Ash combo, it's pretty good. Imperm on the Turbulence, of course, or Veiler, and then Ash on the Emergency. You can Ash like the Diabell Star cards if you want to. I don't know if it's like that good, but at the same time, the deck itself plays fairly similar. It just is going to be a lot more added consistency. So just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're playing this deck or playing against this deck, that the Diabell Star cards are going to raise the ceiling very high. Myself, I really want to play this deck, but I'm not going to try to learn it in like 4 days. So I'm not going to, but I do think this is going to be the best deck in the room. It has a lot of ways to play around a lot of different things. So keep your eye out on this and really learn how to play against this before the event. Tourament up next. I think this deck is still very solid. There is a lot of different plays you have to consider, because if your opponent has cards like Inscription, if you're playing against like Pearly, or other decks that just don't care about the graveyard, it's probably going to be an auto loss, which is really unfortunate because this card just kind of ends Tyr's whole career. But at the same time, there's a lot of different builds of Tyr right now. There's also like the Horus build, there's the no King of the Swamp build, there's the King of the Swamp build. There's some that have a lot more non-engine than others. So it really depends on which tier build you're playing against. I would never assume that you're playing against a very specific tier build until you start seeing those cards, because the Horus engine itself is also very small, so you don't really know until you see it. So this is something where if you are going to scoop to tier early on, at least make sure that you know what they're on and like watch what they mill, so you have a better idea of what to side and what's going to be better to side. I do think that if you're not maining Bishals, you should be siding for at least. I think that these are going to be way too important this event. Also, if they're not in the King of the Swamp build, you really want to make sure that you have Nibiru somewhere, because Nibiru kind of ends tier as well without King of the Swamp. They can put up an early Kaleido Heart, which is very good to do to help play around Nibiru, but at the same time, Nibiru kind of cooks this variant without the King of the Swamp. So it's something else to kind of consider, because if you don't put up like a really early Toad, which I can do sometimes on like 5th summon, Nibiru just kind of does very well in this situation. But overall, if you have like Typhon, you can always just go ahead and summon Typhon as well before you call into main to make sure your opponent can't rock you. So that might be the best option to not run rock just in case, but it just depends on how many times you expect to run into Typhon. So it's also only on the crackback, so it really depends. Talking about Pearly, though, this deck hasn't really changed at all, but there is rivalry that's starting to pop up in this deck quite often, whether it's in the main deck or the side deck. So make sure that post-side you do have like a Lightning Storm or a Duster, or else you will lose randomly to a rivalry, which is really crazy. It happened to me the other day too, and it's so unfortunate whenever you see this. But at the same time, Xyz Encore, I know the card's expensive, but I do recommend it. If you do have Xyz Encore, you should have it in your sideboard at 3, especially if you're playing Tourament, because you can stop Dweller. This card is so good. I highly recommend it. Droll, this card, again, popping up here. You really need a way to stop the tower from coming out, so Droll here is fantastic. I love this card. So good against Pearly, but you really want Droll somewhere in your deck list. Labyrinth. So the whole theory behind Labyrinth right now and the new card Butler, I think that everyone's just going to stay playing the coup clock. You're going to see 0 to 1 Butler. Butler is just really not that good, and it really doesn't solve a whole lot of problems for the deck. So it's usually going to be more so of the furniture variant, and then you're going to see Nibiru in the main deck at 3. So definitely make sure that if you're playing against Labyrinth, you don't walk into Nibiru. They're usually also playing the Shufflers, the Mudora, and the Keldo. The Nibiru play is actually really clean, because you can like nib the board and then also chain the furniture to get it out of your hand. So they're definitely maining 3 of that card. I don't think the trap build will be as prevalent, but I definitely think that the furniture build will be around, and it will be very good. A lot of the builds that I've seen have been on Gamma as well, so really consider that. Ash Bell. Ash should be somewhere in your deck, and then Bell should probably be a 2 of in your side deck. I think that's fine. I don't think it's mandatory, but I think that is definitely warranted. Chimera, the only thing that's really going to change here is that there's a lot of targets now that can dodge Imperm or Valor, because if they use Chimera Fusion and summon out the Dark Ruler Fusion, they can go ahead and use like a Sword Knight or a Codal from hand and the Birthmet on field to go ahead and dodge those Imperms or the targeting effects. So I think that's what's really important about the new card. Less about what it can dump and more about how it's just like a utility card to help you dodge things that are problematic. Then also, you can go ahead and dump things like Invader of Darkness. You can dump the Dark Barrier statue. You can dump the Protector of the Sanctuary and do like the Cope combo with like Reincarnation. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to this board. But at the same time too, when your opponent's trying to like Chimera you and they're like going second against you, it's really good to have Nibiru against his deck, because you force them to use cards out of their hand that they didn't want to use. So I think that's also really important. So definitely make sure that you have Nibiru against his deck whenever they're going second. I think that it's really impactful. Also, like, if you Ash Brand of Fusion, I don't really hate it, because, like, if you Ash Brand of Fusion, it's going to make sure they can't summon Dragoon, because Dragoons become, like, the more popular, like, consensus. So if you let the Dragoon hit the board, it can be a little less good for you. Talking more so about Dragon now, Dragon's just going to be Dragon. I think there's going to be a lot of hand traps in the main deck right now. We have seen some Diabellstar Dragon builds, but that's something that's not super common. Dragon's going to be summing out Borderland as, like, a turbo build, usually. You'll see like the Savage and Seal, or you'll see like a Borderland and a Savage. So definitely make sure that you have a way to out a Borderland in your deck list. I definitely lost to that at Nationals because I couldn't out a Borderland game 3 playing Cash. That was really unfortunate. Droll is very good against this deck. I really do recommend it. This is another deck that Lancia is very good against as well. So that's really cool, because if your opponent's trying to play into your board and they need to like banish things for Bestials or banish it for like the baby dragons, if you Lancia them, you create infinite less options. So I think that this is another build that Lancia would do very well against. Then we have Unchained. Unchained is the deck that has really fallen off. I think that it's still really strong and something that you really have to look out for. but definitely not as popular as it once was. Bell and the Shyama are really important here. Being able to Crow Shyama or Crow the Yama is going to be really good too, as well as Bishals and then Ash and whatever is pop first. This is actually really cool to mention though, because the matchup is going to be less popular, so I think that it's going to do pretty well, because I think a lot of people are going to be expecting it not to be as popular. So just make sure that you are prepared whenever you're going to this event to play against some Unchained, because it is going to be there. This is another deck that can run Inscription, so definitely make sure that you are playing around that to the best of your ability. And then if you're playing a Floodgate, definitely things like Gozen will do very well against this deck. I do hope that this video does help to give some clarity as far as what we can be expecting to see moving forward. If you haven't already joined the Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, or a coaching session on my Metafy, definitely go ahead and check it all out down in the description below, and I'll catch all of you in the next video. Thank you.